Discord. Let's make you a
Okay,
co-host.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. It didn't even ask me if I wanted to save it to my... Oh, is that after? I guess that might be after. I don't know.
You can choose
I think
which
so.
one's which. Yeah.
Well.
All right.
All right, show us what you got.
Okay. So
sorry, windowed.
Windowed.
She wanted the gallery, right?
I
Oh,
think so,
shoot,
yeah.
Where is that button?
It's in the top right where it says view.
Yeah, I can't really do that right now from what my thing looks like. I think my thing's always on gallery. Never mind.
Okay.
Yeah, my thing's always on gallery. I never liked having the full thing.
You have it where like your slide is like quite a bit bigger, but then there's the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you can also change it. You can slide it to where it's about halfway. I'm gonna do that. I think that's the best way to do it.
I have no idea where any of that is.
It's so like in the top right where it says view.
I see view options.
Yeah, and then there's like standard side-by-side speaker. If you click it.
I see side-by-side mode.
And then there's
gallery. There it is. Aha!
Yeah. And I think moving it over about halfway is good because then the slides are like half the screen.
Mm-hmm.
That looks good.
All right.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
We got there.
Okay. We got it. Okay. So, first, my name is Jonah. I'm going to say that right now because it's actually really hard for some people to tell who it is because they don't say the name when we are in gallery mode. So, yeah. I'm going to start off with a bit of a story. So, a lizard man, an angry cop, and a wizard walk into a bar. The lizard man goes up to the bartender and threatens to kill him. And the angry cop picks him up on the shoulder and uses him as a bat in a bar fight. The wizard walks over and tries to awkwardly ask where if there's any dragons nearby, because they heard of one nearby and they wanted to deal with it, while the rest of her teammates go around and fight the rest of the compatriots. 5 minutes passed, and then all the compatriots are actually having a rally against the dragon because the barbarian old cop is made a cult out of the lizard man on his shoulder. That is the insane sort of situations you can get yourself in Dungeons and Dragons. That's more of a promotion thing than anything, but it's important to kind of like understand how did we get to the situation? How did Dungeons and Dragons kind of get here to be able to do all this sort of stuff? And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. I am a dungeon master for my campaigns. I do the hour-long preparation time of like mapping out every little plot point for my players to go in and then have them stomp on it, and I cry in my sleep. But because I'm a dungeon master, I know a lot about Dungeons and Dragons, and so I want to kind of talk about its history and its kind of importance in just modern media. So I want to start with the history. First things first, the man that's known for creating Dungeons and Dragons is known as Gary Gygax. He's a big fantasy lover. He loved things like Lord of the Rings and things like that. Really wanted to get into the inspiration. And so originally he started off making war games, which are just games that you simulate war, like if you've played Risk, that's an example of a war game, things like that. And he started off by making the game Chainmail, which was sort of just a fantasy war game where you use wizards and things like that, kind of implementing those Lord of the Rings elements in there. It was kind of his first foot into medieval. It was his first thing. He normally did other things like that. This was his first one. It is more of the predecessor to the current Dungeons and Dragons. But in 1974, he would continue to work on Chainmail a bit, but he would end up going with the company he's working with and make a new role-playing experience that's less war gamey, which you would name Dungeons and Dragons. This is the first edition. It's very, very simple. It doesn't have a lot of the mechanisms that we have in the current edition of Dungeons and Dragons, but instead it kind of just keeps that little bit of that war game element of like you kind of like choose and you role play to kind of get it. It's incredibly simple, but it exploded in popularity, eventually releasing in 1977 to the advanced version, which really is just two different ones, the basic and the advanced, which would be different levels. This one would explode in popularity in the 1970s and the 1980s. kind of just bringing that Dungeons and Dragons craze and bringing more of the tabletop role-playing game craze, you know, the kind of predecessor to like current RPGs and even video games in general, kind of that you get to be making the story, you get to play the story, things like that. It grew in popularity simply due to its fantastical nature and things like that, which is great, but also kind of sucks because the 1970s, 1980s were a really bad time to come up with ideas like this because, yeah, the 80s D&D Satanic Panic. Satanic Panic is not just directed for Dungeons & Dragons, I would like to point out. It's not big, just only Dungeons & Dragons. When a lot of people think of D&D history, they think of this. They think of it like, oh, we got to stop the kids from being controlled by Satan by playing a game where they're a wizard. No, that's not. Satanic Panic was more of a result of the anti-cult movement from things like Marilyn Manson, things like that, kind of rising up in here afterwards as a sort of like, we got to protect the kids, we got to protect like the young adults from being influenced. And then it eventually slowly built into a more religious thing of like Satan, things like that. Around here will be mostly just times where like people would go and like say certain events was caused by Dungeons and Dragons, kind of just bring out a mass hysteria sort of situation. As kind of stated, I have a quote here. You don't have to read it. It's a kind of a good summary of what they did around the times, brought up by Joseph Laycock in his book Dangerous Games, which is just a little bit of a history of the Satanic Panic. He's simply talking about the results of the anti-cult movement and kind of how those things kind of built its way into hating Dungeons and Dragons. So that sort of situation, like the heavy Christian leaders are like, we gotta stop it. We gotta stop them. We gotta like, look at this kid. This kid committed suicide, and it was because of Satan and Dungeons and Dragons. And when reality had nothing to do with it, you know, it's really easy to lie, especially nowadays. But it's even more then when you couldn't even prove if it was right or wrong. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it actually really influenced Dungeons and Dragons. Now, while sales didn't really plummet from this sort of thing, it was a concern that the company TSR, which was the owners at the time, had about Dungeons and Dragons. Were they going to eventually have lawsuits about it? And so in 1989, they released a second updated edition of Dungeons and Dragons, treating it from the sort of mythical fantasy to a more medieval sort of situation. It removed elements like demons, devils, any sexually suggestive artwork, and also made it so that orcs and assassins were not playable characters. They wanted to move as far away as we are influencing the kids with Satan sort of situation, which had them try to go into different genres, you know, sci-fi, different things like that. But the issue was that didn't really work. A lot of the minutia of this sort of situation was what people liked about Dungeons & Dragons. They could do anything they wanted. Second edition was way more restrictive. It felt less fantastical. It felt like you were just like a reenactment of something. It felt less impactful to the players, which ended up causing TSR to go almost bankrupt, which means they had to sell Dungeons & Dragons name to a new company, which we now know as Wizards of the Coast, which is stationed in Seattle, Washington. They ended up taking the mantle of Dungeons and Dragons and changing it to the third edition. This is the largest revamp of mechanics. This is what literally everything is based on. The D20, the 20-sided die. I have a little bit of an example right here, as I am the Dungeon Master, and thus I must have 1,000,000 die. It's a nice fancy one I have right here. They would basically use this die to decide different outcomes in the situation. You know, if you got a high roll, you do it pretty well. If you get a bad roll, you do it incredibly badly. And that sort of situation, like, was what this was built off of. The rules become more consistent and less do anything, which you would think would make it sound sort of like second edition, where it felt less impactful. But instead, that just made it more of an actual game. It felt like people could do like mechanics and customize their character for specific elements, and they could like really get flaws in. You know, they could be like, oh, I have a bad this, and that means I can occasionally do well, but most of the time I'll do bad, which really, really got third edition into popularity in the Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop sort of situations. In 2003, they would release 3.5, which is really just additional rules and things like that. And eventually the additions of different modules, different like small add-ons would eventually influence other things. But this is currently an incredibly popular addition for a lot of hardcore Dungeons & Dragons fans because it's not as easy as 5th edition, the current edition right now, but it still has a lot of the customization, and it feels more personal for you, with you and your character, which, you know, was really made Wizard of the Coast incredibly loved by the community, both in Dungeons and Dragons and just nerd culture in general. And then they screwed it up. 2005, 4th edition of Dungeons and Dragons. This is a very unliked and very split edition. They simplified everything in an attempt to sort of get the mass media. You know, they wanted to do what Wizard of the Coast did, but better. They didn't. They ended up doing the exact same thing. People don't like 4th edition that much in comparison. It had a less customization element that made 3rd edition so popular and 1st edition so popular. You know, it just kind of had that lack of elements, and thus people didn't like it. 4th edition was a much less successful version, and ended up kind of lowering in sales. And so people spent a lot of time wondering what they were going to do to fix it. Were they going to make it sort of like an updated version? Instead, Wizards of the Coast would eventually announce they were working on a 5th edition for Dungeons and Dragons, and they wanted to take a lot of time on it. They would go from 2005 releasing this one to 2014 for 5th edition. This is the current and actually the most popular in terms of both sales and in the community edition of Dungeons and Dragons. I kind of say it right here. Mike Merles, who's one of the higher ups in Wizards of the Coast, had an interview with the Seattle Times when they wanted to talk about 5th edition when it kind of came out. And then again, when it was more popular, he ended up explaining that this ended up becoming the highest selling version of Dungeons and Dragons of all time, as well as the one with the longest, one that they plan on having the longest lifespan, which currently it's not long enough compared to the original Dungeons and Dragons, but it's kind of like projected to have a longer one. 5th edition is a much more customizable game. It took what people loved about 3rd edition, but kept a more simplistic nature for newer players. It feels more player friendly, and as someone who plays 5th edition a lot more than 3rd edition, I can confirm it's a lot more new friendly. I have a lot of people that when they want to play Dungeons and Dragons, I would always recommend playing 5th edition, the current edition. It's super new person friendly. It's simple. It's got different websites that built off of 5th edition, and thus it ended up making it way more popular into the mainstream than their previous attempts. With celebrities like Critical Role, which is a bunch of different voice actors that like to do Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, as well as collaborations with franchises like Magic the Gathering. 5th edition is kind of the current, what people love about Dungeons and Dragons. It's made it more of less of a niche sort of hobby, which is great, which you know, allows for like us nerds to kind of be seen in the modern light, which has shown the growth of nerd culture, which has been growing since Dungeons and Dragons has come out, since video games have come out. And I have a few examples here. First things first, Stranger Things. A lot of you probably know what this is. It grew massively popular on Netflix when it came out, and it was kind of a big 80s sort of revival, Renaissance love sort of thing. I brought in Dungeons and Dragons, referencing the Demogorgon, which, by the way, not the strongest monster. Yes, it's kind of hard, Sierra of 26, but it's not the strongest. I would rather have the Tarrasque. And there's literally no reason why it's even the Demogorgon for the monster. So really, they could have just used any monster. But I guess Demogorgon, okay, that's fine. I mean, I don't really care about the Demogorgon. He's not that interesting in comparison to any other monster. Maybe that's why. But of course, Dungeons & Dragons also referenced in a lot of shows. Gravity Falls, a loved cartoon, has a big reference to Dungeons & Dragons, one of their episodes. Currently, I have a picture here of the show Community, who had a big episode of Dungeons & Dragons in the 1st edition, which is weird because they used a D20, which was not really that big in the 1st edition. But I'm not here to talk about inconsistencies between the media and the actual game. And of course, what I have now here, Critical Role. If you are new to Dungeons & Dragons and you want to get into it, watch Critical Role. I'd recommend. They have their first campaign already finished, and they're on their second one now. These things can take years to finish because they have a weekly schedule. Yeah, so like prepare for a lot of watching if you really want to get into it. But I would say it's worth it. It will show you what it's like to be in a campaign. But overall, this nerd culture has kind of just grown massively due to all of this. Due to 5th edition, especially 3.5 to 5 would be probably the best contributors, besides the first one, which had a bit of its own issues. And because of that, it kind of had a bigger modern popularity with mythology. So in the middle here, you have a picture of what a fey creature looks like in Dungeons & Dragons artwork. You have two different ideas of fairy creatures. You have the Disney fairy, where like fairy godmother, Tinkerbell, which is actually more accurate to the original one, but people like to still make it seem like it's nice. sort of like happy-go-lucky, and then you have the real, more mythology one from English Times, which has been brought in popularity due to things like Night of the Dragons taking inspiration from things like William Shakespeare and Midsummer's Night Dream, where the fairies are awful and they're just bad people and hate everybody and like to screw with people. And of course, they have more based on the demon sort of basis, like a lot of love for the current like mythology of demons and devils in like different cultures kind of comes from the Dungeons and Dragons takes on it. Use of the Divine Comedy, its layers of hell, that sort of thing, and simply due to its rise, as well as other inspirations, H.P. Lovecraft, things like that, the sort of weird horror, Roman mythology, things like that, which were already popular to begin with, but Dungeons and Dragons has kind of taken in and it's kind of worked with it. And of course, The Hobbit. When it came out, The Hobbit, like when the movies came out, it was big and popular, but Dungeons and Dragons was already inspired by the original books, which came out much longer ago. You'd be surprised how old these books are. The Hobbit, the original Hobbit, like I want to say it was in the 1940s. Well, we went around when it came out. That is crazy to think how old it is, but it kind of shows like this sort of thing can still be like known today and how as inspired today as it feels like then. So like Dungeons and Dragons being a big, massive contributor to it, and thus an inspiration to other things. Baldur's Gate is a very popular game in the current time. It's spiffling now because the third game just came out with this big character creator, but it's specifically based on a module. And then there's the second two games which I want to talk a little bit more about. First off, we have The Legend of Zelda, which actually has its creation simply due to the middle one, Dragon Quest, known as sort of the father of our current modern RPGs. In an interview with Yahoo Entertainment, but mostly Polygon, the creator Yuki Horii stated that a game called Wizardry, which was a Dungeons and Dragons attempt to bring it to like the online video game world, was a big inspiration for a lot of elements of his first game in the Dragon Quest series, which would end up blowing in popularity in Japan and thus inspire a lot of the video games we know today, like Legend of Zelda, which the creator Miyamoto stated in an interview with Polygon as well, that a lot of it is inspired by a lot of these old fantasy elements. He stated things like Peter Pan, but a lot of people like to point out that a lot of these creators also are inspired by Dragon Quest, due to its blow up in popularity and sort of the connection between that and the current fantasy series. And of course, overall, needs the credits, but overall, I just kind of wanted to talk a lot about Dungeons and Dragons. It's something that I love personally. It's something that I feel like a lot of people who have some sort of nerd element in there would love personally. Please, if you can, go ahead and try it out, meet with a group, do things like that. With this kind of knowledge, just have fun. Go ahead and just do what you want, all right? As a DM myself, I'll tell you what I tell all my players. Just have fun. It's a game where you can literally do anything. Just go out, have an adventure, and just make new friends.
All right.
Right.
Good stuff.
All right.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that was good. That was really good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like I went a little over the time limit, but that's fine.
A little bit.
Just a bit.
It happens.
It happens.
I was supposed to give like an 8 to 10 minute speech in school and ended up giving like a 25-minute speech.
Well, I know that. I remember I gave like a 45-minute speech. People loved it because it wasted so much time. The teacher is like, why? Because I had every little element in there. But, it happens.
Yeah.
All
right. Do you want me to go next?
Sure, if you want.
All right. Ugh. I swear I've got the back of like a 90-year-old.
Sitting.
Mm-hmm.
Have any of you ever gone to a doctor to discuss a problem that you might be having, only for them to just kind of like shut you down or tell you that your symptoms are just normal and it's just growing pains, something like that? Well, you're not alone. My name is Christina Melo-Strauss, and I'm here to tell you that it's quite common. I can't stress the importance of finding a doctor who actually listens to you and what you're saying. It seems obvious, but a lot of the time, doctors tend to feed you the information and you just kind of grab off of it instead of really asking yourself, what are you feeling? not what are other people thinking that you're feeling. Now, all of you have been to the doctor before. Some of you might have been to a hospital before. And even if you've never felt like a doctor kind of disregards you, I assume that you can kind of imagine how it would feel and how unhelpful it is. I'm going to start this by doing like from the bottom to the top, for general to more specific. I'm going to start with some statistics and some personal stories and work my way up. The general populace has found, from a survey by Journal of General Internal Medicine, that 67% of people are interrupted by their doctors when they're talking about their symptoms. And out of those people, 59% are interrupted with close-ended questions. Now, the nature of close-ended questions is kind of backing you into a corner. It gives you limited options, options that may not fit what you're feeling in the moment or when you have the symptoms. Also, if you get cut off, you feel a lot less confident. It kind of drains you emotionally when somebody interrupts you because it feels like they're not listening. And especially with people who are extremely worried about any illness they may be having, they may have anxiety, and that may shut them even further in. And that can cause some serious problems if the symptoms point to something more lethal. Now we're going to go a little deeper into groups that have specifically been targeted. It's funny though, because targeted makes it seem like they're being targeted for something, when in reality they're being targeted for not receiving something, medical care. Two of the groups that I'll be talking about are women and racial minorities. But those aren't the only groups that are affected by these things. You've got ethnic groups, religious groups, and people of the LGBTQ community who've always been left behind in medicines and medical trials, been disregarded by doctors simply because they don't feel like treating people that they don't agree with. But we'll move on and we'll start with women. Let me tell you, if I have to report a symptom to the doctor, the very first question that they always ask, regardless of what the symptom is it your period? No, my chickenpox symptoms are not my period. I promise you, the spots on my face have nothing to do with it. I promise. But it becomes much more than that. A lot of the time, a common symptom of menstrual cycles is abdominal pain. And if people go to the hospital for abdominal pain, it could be because of something like their appendix bursting, they have gastrointestinal issues, stomach issues, things like that. Things that can end up being pretty important. But a lot of the time, about, I think it's 33% of women, or not 33%, but women have to wait 33% longer than men to be admitted into the ER for abdominal issues. Now, it's obvious that if men have abdominal issues, it's more likely to be something serious because women so often have abdominal issues. But is it worth the risk of not taking them seriously at first? I've heard many stories of women who couldn't tell the difference between period cramps and their appendix bursting, and that can be fatal. It feels just about the same, varying intensities, but it feels the same. And if you don't get treated quickly, you will die from it. So it's really not prudent of a doctor to leave a woman waiting longer simply because it's so common it's probably her period. It may not be. Moving on to the next group that's been affected, racial minorities. I was pretty shocked. I was looking for statistics on, how often they get disregarded by doctors, things like that. And instead I found something interesting. 40% of first and second year medical students believe that Black people's skin is literally thicker. Like, it's thicker and it stops them from feeling pain as much as others. And 22% of Black people have to wait longer than a white person to receive pain medications based on the AAMC, the American Association of Medical Colleges. Uh, it's quite crazy, but it's been happening for a very long time. Racism in the medical community has been present as long as racism in every community has been present. And it's affecting people still today, especially in things like medicine trials. For example, the COVID trials. A lot of times minorities feel underrepresented in these trials and they feel as though they might be in danger because of it. Whether or not they are remains to be seen because there's no real representation. It's mostly whatever folks they can find off of the street. And since the majority of the American population is white, it tends to just be a majority white focus group. And that leads to problems. Now, it's not only racial and gender and ethnic, religious, and LGBTQ bias that causes these things. Sometimes doctors are just illegitimate. They really are. I've had plenty of problems and have been disregarded, and it's frustrating. And it's really important also to know what's going on with you. If you're taking medications, ask your doctor what they are. Because if you're taking a medication and you end up in the hospital and they try to give you something else, it could cause a serious reaction. I had to stop them from giving me Valium because it would react with my other medications and possibly put me in a coma. They didn't believe that, but I refused the treatment anyways. My plea is that if you feel as though your doctor is not listening to you, change your doctor. It's not easy, I know. I'm still struggling to find good doctors that take my insurance. But if you can, change your doctors. It might take a while. You might have to skip around. You might need to call some doctors out of state. Now it's easier to do because you can do video calls and video meetings. But it's definitely worth the time. Because if not, it could cost you your life. Thank you. Oof.
It was good.
All right. Yeah, it's punctual on the time as well.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, just about. Yeah, I think it's just right at about 5 minutes, I think. So
Perfect.
okay. Nice. Oh, you know what? Actually, first before we get up, where are my slides? There we go. Okay. Did the slides look good on you guys end?
They look good.
Let me try and figure out a good way to skip back and forth. Okay, that's fine. All right. So, check. Okay. So yes, to start, I'm going to go ahead and say, my name is Ben Mitchell, and today I'm going to talk about asteroid mining and its possibilities. So I'm going to start with a fun fact about asteroids from Nancy Atkinson from University Today. She's a science writer. So she says that a 10-kilometer in diameter asteroid that is a metallic type asteroid could possibly contain nearly 4,000 times the mineral value than everything that has ever been mined on Earth before. So I thought that was kind of an interesting fact. So the main takeaway from this is that asteroid mining could possibly provide a long-term solution to the limited material issue that we have here on Earth. Obviously, our materials that we have are not unlimited, and at some point we will run out of them. And you know, which materials will go first is another story. But obviously, mining asteroids is quite a difficult and complex solution to this problem, although it could be possible. So just as a little preview, I'm going to first state, you know, why it's even in consideration, why we would think about mining an asteroid and what its potential benefits could be. Then I will address the challenges and why something like this has never been attempted before in the past, or at least successfully carried out. And then to wrap it up, I'm going to state factors that will affect the future possibilities of mining asteroids. So to start, I'm gonna explain that the M-type asteroids, or the metallic type asteroids, are mostly comprised of three elements that are nickel. Slides. So are nickel, iron, and cobalt. Now these are used to make structural metallic alloys, like steel, stainless steel, and also cast iron. But they are also the main elements in lithium-ion batteries. So that is now specifically about lithium-ion batteries, because of their growing importance in our daily lives. The usage of these batteries have skyrocketed in the past decade. Because of the battery's potential for both high energy density, meaning that you can store a lot of energy in a small mass and small volume, as well as its relative safety compared to other battery types. The lithium-ion batteries have really gone up in use over the past decade. According to a paper written by engineers at FM Global, forecasts expect the global market for lithium-ion batteries to grow from 3.2 billion in 2013 to 24.1 billion in 2023. And this is with respect to the automotive industry alone. So only electric cars, it's going to grow from 3.2 billion in 2013, in one decade from 2013, from 3.2 billion to 24.1 billion in 2023. So eventually our resources, that help us create these lithium-ion batteries will run out, particularly nickel and iron. There's not an unlimited supply of those things. So eventually, due to these increasing rates, we will have to find some sort of alternative solution. So the third benefit of possibly mining asteroids, particularly the metallic group asteroids, metallic type asteroids, are platinum group metals. So platinum group metals are these 6 particular elements that you'll see on the screen here, and they are extremely rare here on Earth. And according to Martin Elvis, who's an astrophysicist at Harvard, he estimates that it is about $50,000 per kilogram of just platinum. Although these other 5 elements are similarly priced, as they have very similar properties to platinum. So the metallic type asteroids contain smaller amounts of these in comparison to nickel, iron, and cobalt. However, it is still a significant amount to what we have here on Earth, and that's where most of the value of an asteroid would come from. So these 6 metals have many uses in different types of industries. However, it's not really known how many different uses they could have because of the little amount that we have of them. And also, because of the small amount of them that we have, it's nearly impossible to use them at any sort of industrial scale. So, all right. So I've grazed over some of the possible benefits of mining asteroids, but now I will go through the challenges and why something like this has never been successfully attempted before. So let's see. The main issue is that there are few metallic type asteroids near Earth that would be cost effective to actually to mine. Although, because detecting and characterizing asteroids even near Earth is a challenge and something that's an ongoing struggle that they have in the astronomy department. Yeah, as stated by the Harvard professor Martin Elvis, Harvard professor of astrophysics Martin Elvis, we are detecting about 1,000 near-Earth asteroids per year, but we're only determining the composition of particular asteroids at a rate of 100 per year. So he claims that in order to accurately assess the number of cost-effective metallic type near-Earth asteroids, we would need these 2 rates to be the same. So that is the main struggle that we've got. The second one being, and yeah, the next The next struggle would be actually mining the methods. It's quite the engineering feat to do such a thing. And that is because of the complex environment, or the, oops, I'm sorry, mining materials would be complex in space due to the zero-G environment. Using earthly methods for mining in outer space would result in chunks of precious metal flying off into space, because you can't just drill into an asteroid when it has no sufficient gravity to hold it together. According to Scott Dorringtona and John Olson at the School of Mechanical and Manufacturing Engineering at the University of South Wales, this quote up here, the design, whoops, guys are in the way. The design of the machinery to carry out these operations is expected to differ greatly from terrestrial mining due to the unique environmental conditions of the asteroid, such as the lack of appreciable gravity and atmosphere. So, that is the other main challenge. Now, so I've gone over some of the challenges and the reasons why these things haven't been attempted before. The last one actually is the lack of infrastructure. So nothing like this has ever been attempted before, and it'd be insanely risky for any investor to try and throw money at this, because it's just uncharted waters, and a failed mission would be extremely economically devastating, because a ton of resources would go into a mission, and if it didn't come back successful, then you have almost nothing to show for all that money that you put in. So it would be an economic challenge for sure. So those are some of the obstacles that are in the way, that have prevented or delayed companies from attempting something like this. But now I'm going to go into the factors that could possibly, increase the possibility or decrease the possibility if these things don't happen in the future. So the first one is, as funny as it might sound, a moon base. So according to Lonnie Sheckman, a science writer from NASA, she describes that NASA plans for a moon base. Hopefully, sometime in our lifetime. Obviously, NASA doesn't always follow through with its plans, but they do plan to do something like this. Now, the moon would actually make a great place for some sort of mining apparatus to land, process the materials on the surface of the moon, repackage them, and then send them back into another vessel particularly designed for re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. So that's one positive thing. The next thing is the privatization of space enterprises. Now it's accelerated the innovation of spaceflight greatly since private space companies have taken over. And on the screen here we got the respective areas in which we've innovated quite a bit, which is the rocket engines. That's the Merlin engine there on the screen. Very, very efficient rocket engine compared to some of the other engines that we've used in the past. The other thing is reusable boosters, particularly for getting things outside of Earth's atmosphere. Being able to reuse those is extremely economically helpful, and also entirely reusable rockets is also something that would be very, very useful economically to a mission like this. But overall, it's helped in our capabilities in spaceflight and for space operations as well. And so we kind of have our feet wet in the area now, rather than just having gone to the moon, sending out some telescopes and whatnot out there, satellites and stuff. We've really got some solid ground to work with here. So yeah, and then let's see, let me keep that slide. For the conclusion, mining asteroids could potentially revolutionize our ability to explore space, first of all, as well as our technological innovations and advancements back here on Earth, with regards to the platinum group metals, also just an increase in some of the other metals that we mine, like iron, nickel, and cobalt. All that would be extremely beneficial. But it would be extremely challenging, and it may not be another decade until we see something like this actually being attempted, due to the challenges that I already stated. It's a huge economic and physical task, complex economic and physical task to do something like this. However, further advancements in any sort of space flight, whether that's colonizing Mars, building a moon base. Any sort of anything like that is going to help because it's really going to kind of set the ground for further space flight. So all of that, which we're working on as a civilization right now, could help with potentially mining asteroids in the future. So to conclude, I'm just going to say that although there's many obstacles we have to overcome, the costs could possibly outweigh the benefits in the near future, or at least within our lifetime, hopefully. And it would change the world completely. So that's it.
All right.
What if you just broke it into a smaller piece and then just sent it back so it could be mined on Earth?
Right. So that's kind of the whole thing with like the moon base is
you just take the smaller chunks and then
yeah.
process
and
it better.
One other thing that I didn't mention because I realized I wouldn't have enough time is something called Lagrange points, which are actually kind of interesting. They're points in space where the force of gravity between two massive objects effectively cancel out. So you can have something like a space station stay within this gravity well, and it would remain a fixed distance away from Earth, but a little bit further away than in orbit. But it'd be a great place for like a space station or a materials processing unit, out in space. So that's one other thing I didn't mention, but
them guys really coming in clutch.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
But okay, yeah. Oh, man. I was nervous. Shoot.